All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to episode 5 of the Marketing Operators Podcast. We are taking a bit of a tactical step back today, and we're talking more teams. So we're talking org structure. We're talking, granularly who focuses on what within all 3 of our orgs. We're talking communication frameworks and diving into all of that fun team building stuff. So hope you enjoy. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Motion, Richpanel, Haus, and Aftersell. So we are all users of Motion here. I think we all use it for creative analysis and decision making when it comes to creative. I know it's been instrumental at HexClad for us making good and quick decisions to invest our ad dollars in the best creative possible. But I'm curious, Connor and Cody, how are you guys using Motion in your creative optimization and production process? Connor, you wanna kick it off?
Yeah, I mentioned a couple episodes ago when we were talking about performance creative specifically that we have a meeting dedicated and led by media buyers, and more or less Motion is our source of truth for that. So from a bottoms up approach, like how are we organizing and analyzing the data that's going to lead to better and faster decisions? And that's what's ultimately going to drive revenue for us. So that's how we're looking at Motion on a daily and weekly basis.
Yeah, one thing I've really learned from this podcast, which has been great, is that naming conventions are really the heart and soul of every direct-to-consumer brand. And that is nowhere more true than in Motion. And I kid, but I'm serious. If you can think of a way to slice the data, you can analyze it in Motion super easily. You don't have to have a data analyst in your team. You don't need to know any super metrics or anything like that. You just figure out what you want it to contain, what you want to compare. How are videos versus statics doing? How is this agency doing? How is this creator doing? I love that you can create a snapshot. And so instead of needing to give somebody access to your whole ad account, you can just say, hey, this editor or this agency or this creator, I just want to show you what your ads did and how they performed. So make it super easily to compare data, analyze data however you want, and then make it very, very easy to be able to communicate with the creative teams, which is really what we're trying to do. We're all trying to, make it simpler to make, better decisions and ultimately make more revenue. And I think that's what Motion helps us all do. Jones Road Beauty uses Motion. HexClad uses Motion. Ridge uses Motion. Nearly every fast-growing DTC brand I know of uses Motion. If you want to get some heart and soul into your DTC brand, by getting your creative analysis right, go to motionapp.com and mention the Marketing Operators Podcast to get 50% off your first month.
All right, we are here. Episode 5, we've made it. How are we doing?
Dude, feeling great.
And you were in the woods last time, Connor. You made it back out from the woods. Nothing went wrong. Everything was all good. Avoided bears, ticks, all the above.
Avoided all bears and ticks. Yeah. Travel back was kind of rough, but we survived. Newark Airport's not particularly fun.
Where were you?
I was in New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is a small town on the Delaware River, just across from Lambertville, New Jersey.
And you're a
Most
fisherman, right?
I'm not a fisherman, no.
I thought you were. I thought you were big into fishing.
No, not at all. No, I'm into online advertising and e-commerce marketing mostly are some of my
okay, got it.
passions. Yeah. Easy to confuse. But yeah, no, we were. I worked remotely most of the week, but we took some time off. We went up to the city. We hung out in the woods in Pennsylvania. So overall, good week of some R&R.
You were about an hour, maybe hour and a half from me. I feel like that's right outside the boundaries of having to call me and be like, hey, I'm in your hood. If you're any closer, I would have expected it.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah. If I ever get closer, I'll keep you in the loop.
I appreciate it, especially if you ever make it out to your boy Marquise Brownlee's studio. We're half hour out.
Oh, yeah. I saw him on Friday. We went to the Knicks game.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool. Talk at all about the Humane video?
We didn't talk about the Humane video. Yeah, Sean had gotten a sneak peek that it wasn't going to be positive. But I'll tell you guys a side story. So we actually took their whole team to the Knicks game. So there's 14 people on those teams on his team, and one of the guys I went to college with randomly, and we did a project together my senior year. So we haven't talked to each other in 10 years, but randomly reconnected at the Knicks game. So incredibly small world.
Damn. And did you know that going into it? Did you have any clue?
No, not at all.
He just showed up at the game.
Well, I actually didn't even recognize him at first. So he's in some of the videos. His name's David, and he's got like these really cool kind of like cinematic shots that he does. And I'd used one for like a mood board we put together months ago. So I saw him and I'm like, yeah, you look familiar, but I've seen your photo like 100 times because I've looked at it for so long. And he goes, you look familiar. And I'm like, dude, we don't know each other. Like, you know, it's one of those things like, this is just kind of a random thing. I must look like someone else that you know. But no, it turned out we dialed it in. We're both UC Santa Cruz graduates. We shared a professor in Dr. John Scardin. So kind of a crazy way to reconnect with this guy.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And Cody, what's been going on with you? Any fun
I just
things?
got back from vacation. Yeah, I actually just got back from vacation today. Was in the Bahamas from Thursday till now, so about 5 days away. And my two observations, I'm trying to get better about like unplugging and relaxing, and proud of myself because a lot of it was like I was checking Slack. I'm like, hey, that can wait. That's not urgent. So that felt good. But number one, I feel like, especially if you're like an entrepreneur, founder, operator, like you don't really sink into it and start relaxing until like the last day of vacation. I don't know if you guys feel like that. It was like a short one. It was like a 4 or 5 day thing. And so I feel like the last day you're finally starting to relax. Also, traveling with a toddler, vacationing with a toddler, I feel like you need a little bit of a vacation after that when you get back.
Was that the first time with your daughter?
No, but she's just like a handful right now. Luckily, we were with family and stuff, so had some runs. But yeah, do you guys feel like that ever if you're taking some time off, or are you like that? Like it takes you a little bit to really sink into like relaxation mode, or not?
I struggled with that major early on in my career, and then like at some point, like I don't know when it was, probably 2-3 years ago, I had an experience where I came back from some time off, and I just had this like reinvigoration of energy, and it like clicked for me. It's like, oh, actually, like the time off is actually so important for making me a more effective operator. Like it re-energized myself. I like regained focus when I'm coming back. So now I'm like pretty good about that. Like I actually realized that like having interests and focuses in other parts of your life, it actually makes you more effective in whatever, you know, your profession is. So that's been hugely important for me. And now I'm fairly good at like checking out when it's time to check out and checking back in when it's time to check in. And I realize if I don't, I'm just gonna like come back and be like tired and like burnt out, and that's the opposite of being productive. But it's something I had to like figure out through trial and error for sure.
I'm not good at checking out. Haven't quite figured it out. My favorite way to travel, I was gone all of last week. I took Thursday off. We went up to New York City, but otherwise, like I almost prefer working like 2-3 hours. I'll do it in the morning and then I can kind of check out. But like extended periods of time of being offline, I have not mastered by any means.
I'm with you. It's a work in progress.
It's nice to nice to be like when you're out to like cancel all your meetings, but then still work a handful of hours, but just straight up deep work. And it's like you feel like you're catching up on the world because you don't have any calls to do that ultimately just produce more follow-ups for you. So yeah, I feel that for sure. It's nice to have that uninterrupted deep work time.
That's why I also love holidays. You get that like Memorial Day, one of the best days to work.
Yeah. So today, you know, the last 4 episodes have been pretty technical, pretty like channel level tactical. So we're taking a little bit of a step away from that today. And we're talking about what really makes all of our organizations able to run and scale to 9 figures and beyond, and would not be possible without it. I think we can all agree on that. And that is just overall team building and org structure, and, you know, how we've gone about building not just growth teams, but overall marketing teams and just entire company teams to support, you know, 9-figure growth. So yeah, that's the topic for today. We're going to go deep into all sorts of things like org structure, internal versus agency, you know, effectively managing teams, you know, BPO versus onshore, thinking versus doing, all sorts of fun kind of frameworks for thinking about team structure. But before we get too deep into that, Cody texted us before this, said he has a fun opener. We don't know what it is. He could say anything right now. Cody, what you got for us?
Producers can decide to cut this out if they want. To me, this is fun, but it kind of shows how much of a nerd I am. I was just thinking about this the other day, and I tweeted about it. And I don't know if I communicated it well, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about, and would love to hear how you guys kind of weigh in on it. It was something along the lines of like, I wish there was a way to know how much outstanding demand you've created from ads that you've already ran. And I'm thinking of this in terms of forecasting and preparing for future launches, Memorial Day weekend promos and things like that. And a lot of the people that are going to buy during those periods are going to be, they have probably seen our ads and we've probably gotten them into our funnel throughout this year from January until now. But there's not really a great way to know what that lag and what that effect is going to be. And I think it's really easy to get cold feet and be like, hey, this is not that efficient. Like, I don't know if this is going to work. But we, like, for example, we do forecast, repeat versus revenue and cohorts, and we know the lag or the delayed revenue that we're going to get once we've acquired somebody. So once they've been acquired, then we can say, hey, 20% of them will purchase again within this many months. But it's hard to do that based on impressions and things like that. And I think SaaS does this well, or lead gen, right? If they have, number of leads or demos or something like that, well, they actually do have upper funnel metrics that I feel like correlate to that pretty well. And they can say, hey, this number of leads leads to this number of calls, or whatever the metrics are. I'm really not that familiar. But I don't really think we have that in e-commerce. I don't really think total spend is a great one, or impressions or CPMs. So I don't know if I communicated that well, but it's been something I've been thinking about a lot. Is that something you guys think about or look at or have thought about?
So just to be clear, you're saying like if you're going to drive like 7 conversions over the course, or if you're going to drive conversions over the course of 7 days from first time orders, how many folks converted from the ads they saw in that 7 days versus ads that ran prior to that 7 days, and then they saw something from your brand that converted them?
Yeah, because especially with upper funnel channels, TV and stuff like that, when we have these launch events, these tentpole moments, I know Sean calls them funnel clearers, but like we are capturing a lot of the value that we've created from the demand that we've created all quarter or maybe 6 months long. But you don't really know how much demand you've created until you actually capture it. And you have that sale moment, you have that product launch, whatever it is. But I really wish there was a way to actually know and have like a proxy metric or like a leading indicator that would correlate, because then I'd be able to lean into that and say, hey, like we're actually hitting our target here. We're above target. We're expecting a massive Q4 because we know that in September we've done this much impressions or something like that. And I just don't believe impressions would be the metric. I don't think it would correlate that well, but I think that would be super helpful to know.
Yeah. I don't know if we certainly haven't arrived at the conclusion that I think you're ultimately asking about, but we've certainly done some analyses to get a sense of that. So last year when we were in October, in September and August, when we were trying to figure out like how low can we ride this business efficiency wise and still hit our year-end goals, we were basically looking at our post-purchase survey, how long have you known about us question from 2022 November, to just understand like a ballpark, what percentage of customers can we expect to like get an impulse buy from during November, and what percentage can we expect to have been in the funnel for a month or longer. And that actually gave me some serious confidence to run our business at a much lower MER than we ultimately wanted to be at the year end, knowing that I was just filling up the funnel, and that 3 out of 4 conversions that happened in November and December were going to come from folks that did not that initially saw our brand outside of that offer period. It wasn't an exact, it was like, not exact science there, but we ended up hitting pretty close to our MER goals for the year. So we timed it up pretty good. Another one that I'm realizing is interesting with Haus, because we actually just got our first test back, and we were reviewing that with their team today. And with our conversion period, we're going to do a lot of what they call like the lag effect analysis, where you see that initial cost per incremental between your different cells, but then you let it sit for another week or two to see how that grows over time. That's another interesting one that I think will, it'll be interesting to see like what that percentage growth is over time. And I think it's moving you towards that conclusion. It's not getting you all the way there, I don't think. That's at least how we've started taking steps towards that though, but it's not all the way there, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I think post-purchase makes sense. I think my thoughts on post-purchase, but I do think that makes sense. And then we ran a similar analysis with like Northbeam last year, looking at MTA data. So we looked at leading up to Q4, like what our day one ROAS to 7 to 12 day ROAS was over the customers that we acquired at different time periods, for the spend at different time periods. I think the thing and that was extremely valuable. And same thing as you. I don't think we got quite as aggressive as you did, but we did push it pretty hard leading into that. And I do believe that was a big factor in our success. My only thing with that is I think I'm thinking more on like view-based things and not just click. I'm thinking TV, I'm thinking YouTube, I'm thinking even like meta reach. And I've always gotten a little bit, cold feet, like as we're leading up to these moments and MER doesn't look that great. And then I look back and I'm like, hey, I actually wish we spent more leading up to it. And so I guess I'm just looking for things that would maybe give me a little bit more confidence to lean into that pretty poor efficiency because it's going to pan out later on. What do you think, Connor? Ridge?
Yeah, it's a really tricky question, I think. Like the couple things that I've heard that feel related are Ben from True Classic has a really great line about like the dollars that you've spent should be like an asset on your balance sheet. Like you have grown brand awareness to some degree. That doesn't get anywhere near that previous spend predicting success in a forward-looking period. Like I think that's where it gets super tricky. One of my friends who was CMO at ColourPop was like a huge fan of earned media value, that she thought that was a really great predictor of future success, that little bit of like buzz. And that's a softer metric at that point. You're getting mentions on social or engagement on influencer posts, which I think is interesting. For us, we have no great way of thinking about it other than like intuitively serving impressions before a big sale seems like it would be good. We will look at something like brand queries. I think I've mentioned this before, but like, when we can show YouTube ads or display ads or Facebook ads or whatever, and even if we're not capturing revenue in that immediate period, but we're seeing an interest in the brand and someone's actually, you can't optimize for somebody searching for your brand on Google, but if that's what you're creating, I think that is maybe a better signal for a higher quality in-market audience versus just looking at something like impressions.
I agree. I think those are all good. Yeah, I'm definitely familiar with EMV and kind of looking at it that way. I think those are all good. Yeah, I think there's probably not one, but that's a challenge. And I'm sorry if that wasn't fun. That was just kind of what's been on my mind lately.
One other point there, because I think we're going to do a similar thing to Connor, where one of the biggest efficiencies that we could gain going into a sale period is understanding the value of the spend before that period. So what I'd like to do is, identify a portion of the country going into our Father's Day sale, just spend in, it'll be like May 1st to May 15th. As the sale starts, stop. And then we actually see exactly what that lag effect is, because that might help us better identify it as a good or bad investment. And then going into Q4, maybe we could be more aggressive.
It's like a manual geo holdout incrementality test, or not. I mean, not sort of, right? But like a geo-based lag test, kind of.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
That's cool.
That's how I think that would be the best way to identify whether that pre-campaign spend is the value that we think it is, during the sale.
Yeah.
Really if anyone's listening, like definitely give us some feedback. It was actually super cool. Unrelated to this, had somebody who's really smart slide into my DMs. I don't know, after listening, we were talking about like email capture on quiz funnels versus not. And I was like, we haven't really tested it. And he had tested it and had cool data. So I think that's one of the cool things about talking through things like this is if anyone else is out there and has some data and has tested it, like I'm all ears and down to learn. And if it's interesting, we'll even share it on the next episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. The podcast is actually like a PSYOP. We're just crowdsourcing the best ideas that we can implement in our businesses.
This is our best growth tactic yet for our brands.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, that was my version of fun, but I don't want to waste all the time on that. So why don't we get into the team building stuff? What do you guys say?
Yeah, let's do it.
So next, we're going to talk about two things: customer service and artificial intelligence. Our next sponsor, Richpanel, is a platform that combines the best of AI and humans to respond faster, manage all channels, and scale your customer service. They do this in a number of different ways, but their ultimate goal is for you to get every agent responding as if they're your best agent. First, my favorite part, which actually isn't AI related, is better self-serve tools so that your customers and prospects can find the information they need without ever submitting a ticket. But when they do submit a ticket, they have artificial intelligence that learn from your previous interactions. So it's not a ChatGPT wrapper that's just going to rattle off whatever it thinks is the best way to respond to a customer. It's actually going to understand what are historical interactions you've had to recommend and automate the responses to customers submitting new tickets, as well as new ways to augment your current agents so that they can respond more efficiently and empathetically. If you're interested in Richpanel and bringing AI to your customer service teams, visit richpanel.com.
So I think I like to start high level with this stuff because it really is it's like an onion, man. There's just layers to these orgs, and it's really interesting to hear how people think about these layers. So what I think is interesting here is we have 2 CMOs, we have 1 head of growth. I'm very curious, which parts of the org, Cody, let's start with you. Which parts of the org report directly to you? Which parts don't report directly to you?
Yep. I'm Chief Marketing and Revenue Officer. So I have marketing. So for us, marketing is growth, brand, and then creative is now, I guess part of marketing reports to me. So, heads or would-be heads of each of them have customer experience reporting to me as well, have retail team reporting to me, and then also have a few shared reports. We don't have a CEO, so it's our C-suite is actually myself and one other person. So have finance reporting to me, shared, have a chief of staff reporting to me as well. So it's pretty much everything but product operations and people operations.
Cool. And what about you, Connor? And I'm glad you stopped there because I want to go, I want to pause and then go into the layers a little bit. But Connor, what's the setup for you, high level?
Yeah, super high level. We have marketing and brand. I have a VP of brand who oversees content production, art department. That's all of our designers, organic social copywriting. And then marketing is a lot of the stuff you typically associate. We have all of paid media. We have retention under that. We have performance creative there, partnerships, a couple other handful of teams. That's why it rolls up right now.
Okay. Yeah, we're a little different because we don't actually have a CMO. We have our marketing, I'm head of growth, and then we have a chief brand officer. So we don't have that all rolled up under one, which is an interesting difference. So then our content team and our brand partnerships team reports into our chief brand officer, and then growth oversees, the classic growth channels, paid media, creative, retention, affiliate, SEO, influencer. But then we also have these dotted lines. Growth technically is also community reports to growth, but then we have these clear dotted lines, which I'm curious how you guys handle this too, where brand partnerships does not report to me. They report to our chief brand officer, but there is we still meet bi-weekly. There's a clear dotted line to growth because we need to be implementing all these growth tactics and performance marketing tactics and analytical setups with these partnerships. So it's super important to have that. And say with our website, website technically reports into our chief information officer. But again, there's a lot of things we do on website that are very growth related. All of our sale builds, we're always doing CRO testing. We're always building out more brand oriented pages that we're trying to use to drive growth. So again, dotted line to me, but does not report directly to the growth team. So do you guys have any other sort of relationships like that in your org? Because that's something I've found to be super critical is you cannot silo these things. There has to be dotted lines of some sort to make sure you're working cohesively. So what do the dotted lines look like for you guys?
I think creative is one. Now the creative director reports to me, but that's a pretty new thing. And so even before that, as we're building a creative team on our growth team, a creative pod, on our growth team, our creative director technically has a dotted line to any of the creatives on the growth team. So there's a ton of overlap and interaction there. And so, yeah, that's probably the biggest one that I could think of. I guess me, director of people as well, I'm very involved there. So probably some dotted lines there as well.
I would say the biggest one for us is the creative piece as well. How is our brand team the one establishing brand guidelines or some of the core mission, vision, values of the company? There's just this natural, very dotted line to all other teams. How is our retention team implementing brand strategies versus our performance creative team, et cetera? So that's I don't know if that's technically a dotted line other than that's the way that we want our core brand assets to kind of emanate throughout the business. So that's where it is for us. I do want to say I love the distinction between brand and growth. I secretly really don't like the chief marketing officer title. I think marketing just feels like it's become it's so different between organizations, and it's grown so diverse over time that like I think it ends up creating inconsistencies. The first brand I ever heard do the brand growth breakout, I'm sure there's been many of them, but like Away was the first one. This was 6 or 7 years ago, and they did like a little PR push around how they were treating it differently. So I frankly really like your guys' org structure, Connor. I think it's an intuitive way to build a brand today versus marketing can just be many different things. Is it brand? Is it creative? Is it paid media? Like it's just
too general, right? It's like, it's so vague that it doesn't necessarily have any definition at all. But I think it like having it broken by growth and brand, it also like the responsibilities are very clear, but there's also a super clear connection there. Like our head of content is hyper involved with the production of our upper funnel assets that we're producing. So YouTube ads, streaming, linear TV spots. I mean, he is the person on set producing those. But then at the same time, myself and our former director of paid media, now head of advertising, he just got bumped up to that title. We are super involved in collaborating with him, obviously, because at the end of the day, it's a brand marketing asset, but in a performance marketing channel. You know, we talked about this last time, like all of our upper funnel content is very brand oriented. But at the end of the day, like we're measuring YouTube and streaming and linear as a performance channel. So it's been a lot of fun to see that relationship fold and see how we collaborate together unfold. And also really fun to see our head of content who comes from, you know, a production background, worked at Bon Appetit and Condé Nast. Now he's starting to think like more of a direct response growth marketer. So it's been fun to see kind of the stuff that he's been able to produce with some guidance on the direction to take the creative from myself and Cam, who's our head of advertising. So I just think it's super interesting to like talk about like how do you handle that? How do you handle that connection? Like, is it like a meeting cadence that you guys stick to where every month you're meeting with certain people, every 2 weeks, every week? Because I know that's how I handle it, where I'm meeting with like these dotted line people. I meet with biweekly, our head of content biweekly, chief brand officer biweekly, and then people that report directly to me weekly. So do you have any systems or frameworks or meeting cadences that y'all are using to keep those like related departments that aren't directly reporting to you connected and make sure you're working cohesively? What does that look like?
For us, I would say it's like an order of operations where we're moving like, I almost see it as it falling downstream from one another. Like when we go to launch a new Father's Day campaign, we're establishing kind of brand guidelines for that, both visual and from a copy perspective. We've got marketing objectives, and those are more like growth objectives. What do we want to sell? What is our pricing strategy, et cetera? So we're like creating all of these ingredients that are getting pulled down to the different channels. And in that, we can kind of set, like I used the word guidelines earlier, where it's like we can put small constraints on the performance creative team or the paid media team so that we can ultimately hit our acquisition goals and our growth goals while maintaining like the maybe softer brand goals of the company.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's something I actually think we've not done a good enough job of, but are starting to, like infiltrating our tentpole offer moments, which are classic performance moments with brand messaging and like more than just Mother's Day sale, like shop up to, you know, X dollars off. So what is that, like tactically speaking, who's the one leading the charge on that, Connor? And then how do you ensure that the folks, you know, developing ad creative and writing copy for ads and email and all that are putting that into, like, what does that tactically look like? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, so I work really close with our VP of brand. He's also here in Utah, so we're working in person once or twice a week. And we actually deliver like marketing summaries and brand summaries. So we are working very closely on that. I'm setting the goal of like, you know, this is what we're launching. This is how it relates to channel strategies. This is what last year's Father's Day sale looked like. How are we going to build off that into this following year? From a brand standpoint, he's taking in some of that information, and how are we supporting the goal of, for instance, Father's Day is, we want to have a focus on Daniel and Paul. The founders of the company are a father-son team. So it's like, hey, we've got this really nice point. We've seen success with like founders ads. So there's like a performance kind of goal to it. But then all of a sudden the brand team can run with that. How do we specifically want to speak to that? How are we writing copy around that? How can that look and feel? And then all of that then gets delivered to channel managers who are like, okay, this is how I can design the emails now, or the paid ads, or how I can work this into our organic content strategy.
Okay. So like super thorough memos almost from both marketing and brand. And you don't even, like, these channel managers aren't even getting, like, they don't start doing anything until that happens, it sounds like. So they have all the details and information in front of them, and then they can go out and start producing.
That's the goal. Like, so I see we have campaigns, and then so those are those really in-depth memos and kind of strategy pieces. Then we go to, from that, we're creating actual content, we're producing new stuff. And then by the time our retention manager gets it, in theory, it never works out this way perfectly, but a bunch of content has been created. You've got content that is reflective of the initial brand and marketing summaries, and then we can pull that down to actual channel strategies. So that's how we've done it. And then we're rolling those out in like meetings Monday. The whole team will meet, so we'll discuss the launch of these summaries. And then Thursdays, we'll actually review the go-to-market strategy so we can look at everything holistically before it's actually going live. And that's how we're trying to like establish some of that cohesiveness, as well as balancing the two goals.
That's awesome. Cody, how about you?
You mind if I share a little bit more, like go back a second, share kind of like what the org looks like the departments within marketing and brand? Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I've got, I guess, the three pillars to me. It's brand, growth, and creative. So currently don't have a director of growth, haven't had one. I've kind of just always played that role. But now that I have other responsibilities outside of marketing, I'm just needing to for time. So actually have an offer out to somebody, fingers crossed on that. We were originally hoping to get somebody that would oversee, like, to me, the growth, like the departments under growth. It's like growth, which is like all of your paid media, retention, growth creative is another one as well. And then, different companies are different. Two that we actually don't really have any hires currently for, we're pretty lean, but would be e-com, so that would be site, and then data. And I think those can depend. Some places those are under growth, some places they're elsewhere. I think for us, that would make more sense. So I was hoping to get somebody like more senior to oversee all of them. That was a little bit of a pipe dream, and just kind of limited the talent pool too much. So decided to go just for growth and offer, director of growth, which would be more on the acquisition side. But those are kind of our current ones, trying to get like a director of each little department there. And then under brand, we've got brand, social. So that's like organic social, influencer. For us, influencer beauty is more brand related. It's not really growth. We don't do any like a lot of paid stuff. It's much more earned media value, a lot of gifting, a lot of relationship building. They do affiliate as well, but it's just cleaner to keep it under brand. So it's there. We put marketing operations under brand. That's kind of part of a recent reorg. So they do stuff across the org. That's really like our project management team. We've got a team of 3 people who are helping to do all of our project management, communicating, disseminating the information, coordinating kind of marketing things with the rest of the team, with ops, with product. And then, we also have a copy would be under there as well. And so and then we've got creative team. So creative team, we have a creative director, we have design, and then video are like the 2 departments there. And so when we have, let's say we've got a launch, like let's say I've got open like a brief for Memorial Day, promo that we do. It starts with the brief. And so our senior director of brand, who happens to be my wife, family company, she starts with our, the brief of what it is. So we'll have, product messaging, copy, what are we launching? What are we saying about it? What are we not saying about it? What are the details? So that's her. And then our brand, our marketing ops team as well. And all of that, once it gets reviewed and approved, will go to the team. Don't quote me on dates, but let's say that's probably about 2 weeks ahead of a launch, and that'll go to all the channel owners. And so whoever's, the channel owner, the more senior person, on their team, will then put their thoughts in there. We like to do as much async as possible. And there of growth, creative strategist is putting, hey, here's what I think we should run for creatives. Retention is saying, hey, here's what I think the email cadence and plan is going to be, and messaging around that. And we'll all just kind of review it, give feedback on there. And then once we have all of these dates tracked in Asana. And then once we kind of weigh in, so it's really myself acting as head of growth or senior director of brand, kind of, provide feedback, weigh in, approve it. Then we just approve it. That turns into like what we call a handbook So that's got like all of the information, all the launch plans, and then everybody takes that and goes and just like does the work on their channel. Creative team goes or growth creative goes and creates creative for ads. Retention team with our designers do their thing. So that's kind of how we go about it. Yeah.
That's super helpful. Yeah, I think I've noticed this with a lot of company leaders that the briefing and memo process is super thorough and super well thought out before any execution work starts happening. One of my favorite business podcasts I listened to recently was with Sam Korkos, the Levels founder, and like their memo culture is insane, and it infiltrates into the entire business. But I think he says that writing is just refined thinking, and I think that's so true. Like when you write these briefs and these well thought out memos, I think the output you get from your channel managers is just so much better. There's a lot less, fixing of mistakes because everyone's on the same page from the jump. I also really like, Cody, that you start the process, but then you let your channel managers weigh in. That's really interesting. Has that always been how you've done it, or did you learn that was more effective over time?
It's a good question. I guess it depends the channel. Like for paid, it's mainly coming from me. And as we have a director of growth, I think it'll come from them, but with input from me. But I guess what I mean by that is like influencer. So my opinion, and one of the things I'm really trying to get to, is a director of every department. We've grown super quickly and we haven't always had that. So we may have a manager of some and not necessarily a director, but I'm really looking to get that. And get one person kind of owning each one. But so we have a director of influencer. And so once we she gets a brief, and we also tier our launches. So it's an A, B, or C, or like A plus, B plus. And we kind of have these different templates. So it's like an A launch is like all systems go, tons of ads, new landing pages, 1,000 influencer sends, stuff like that, sponsored influencer content, big press push, right? That's like all systems go. We might do some direct mail, that's like a brand new hero product. A B launch is like, that might be a shade extension of a hero product. It might be a new launch. And then a C is like, hey, this is just like an accessory SKU that we're adding in here, but it's not a big one. So that tells the team how much to invest and put into it. But then, yeah, so like influencer, definitely, social, definitely, retention as well. They kind of do, but I guess on the acquisition side, like I'm currently doing that, but I'll work with the team to do that and kind of get those plans.
We have a similar tiering structure. I think that was, we didn't like officiate that until end of 2022 or so. Like we went a long time without a really clear distinction as to like the importance of each. But I'm curious, one thing we've been talking about recently, which I like the idea of, is this difference between like effort and potential impact at the campaign level. Like an example is we launched check-in luggage in March, and from like a creative standpoint, it was like a relatively light lift. It's not a new category. We're largely going to sell check-ins as we sell carry-ons. It's just like a really, really important upsell. So from an effort standpoint, it was relatively low. From an impact standpoint, it was very, very high. And I tried to articulate that to my team because it does make a difference when it comes to like channel strategies. Do either of you have any recommendations as to the best way to do it?
I mean, to an extent, you're sort of guessing, right? At least, well, in that case, maybe not, because you had already, because most of your lift was in establishing that category, right? Like that was the big effort. And then once you had the upsell, at that point, it was like, all right, well, that's low lift. But the only reason that's low lift is because you did this huge lift for the category as a whole. I mean, we historically have not built acquisition funnels around most of our new products because we've just focused on scaling through our core cookware offerings. That's changing now. So we're actually starting to figure that out along the line. And now we're even learning that within these like A and B product drops, there's even like A.1, A.3, or however you want to categorize it, where like a good example is Hex Mill, like Pizza Steel versus aprons right now. We're building out a new product category that's launching soon, but basically Pizza Steel, we weren't even planning on building acquisition funnels around, but organically it got so many first-time orders that were like, hey, why not? Let's see if we can scale this. So that was just paid social landing page because our core site's not really geared towards that. And like statics, we did some UGC with an influencer that we work with, and we took like a hype reel that our had content produced, and we're going to turn that into a DR ad. Aprons, on the other hand, we have made a agreement as an org that we want to chip away at this vertical within the kitchenware space over a long period of time. So this is one where we're doing all the paid social stuff, the landing page stuff, but we've also built out new elements on our website because what we currently had didn't just lend itself, like for cookware, didn't necessarily lend itself to aprons, but we're also producing like Gordon creative and like upper funnel YouTube and streaming creative. So it really comes down to org direction. I don't know how aprons are going to be for us. I'm actually assuming it's going to take time for performance to show up and improve over time as we establish ourselves in that category. But we decided as an organization that we want to make a dent in that vertical of kitchenware. So we're producing the funnels and the assets to support that. Like we're never going to become an apron brand if we don't have, beautiful high production, good storytelling content for YouTube and streaming, and then supporting that with good, DR social content and good landing pages that explain the product well. But that's all up funnel with like our leadership team that informed the level of lift that we should put into that. We'll see what the results are. I think it's going to take time, but that's at least how we've approached it.
So I love that from like a brand strategy perspective. Like you guys are saying, hey, we want to be known for this thing. Like we want to take the time, and we know that it's going to take some time to get it to perform, but we think it's worthwhile for the brand. I love that. And I think that's great. I think it's different if you're, and speaking from experience here, I think it's different if you're just like, hey, we just want revenue and we want efficiency and we want to perform. Like we have made the mistake of not really tiering things as well as we should. And Connor, to answer your question, like putting a lot of time and effort into creatives and landing pages for a launch, and then it just doesn't perform. And it's just, not as efficient spend as if we just kept spend on our hero products. And so the way that we approach it now, unless we have reason to believe that this is going to be a very strong launch, that, our demand planning team or our product team has some insights where they think it's going to perform very well, or sometimes we will create a kit purposely for acquisition, and then we'll go, full effort landing pages, all different types of creatives. But if not, we'll just go minimum viable product. Like sometimes it's just a few statics, few UGC, like you said, see if it takes off. You get some good performance, some good one-day click on that, then you're like, hey, I think there's something here. Let's build on this. But otherwise, we like to probably go slow unless we just know this is more of like a new category thing that we want to launch into.
I do appreciate you guys talking through that with me, just because I do think establishing, like essentially codifying goals for a given campaign or product launch just helps orient the whole business. That's what we've found over the last 18 months. What I'll also say from like a ops perspective, and maybe we could touch on that. Cody talked about marketing ops, which for us has been a big unlock. But from an ops perspective or an effort standpoint, it's been helpful because historically we've been a business that launched very few new products. My first 5 years here, we did very little newness from like a colorway or silhouette or category perspective. And then in the last 2 years, it's increased tenfold. We're doing new categories, new colorways like every other week. We've got new silhouettes. It's like a whole thing. So really identifying where we want to dedicate time and energy and where we expect to see like commercial success has been helpful in setting expectations for everybody.
All of us are Haus customers and very big fans. In fact, I've actually been told I talk about Haus more than my own daughter. So what is Haus? Haus is a marketing science and experimentation platform that enables you to measure true incrementality and allocate budget efficiently to maximize growth and profitability. Haus allows you to comprehensively measure your marketing across all channels to measure the true incremental impact of all of your channels on retail, Amazon, DTC, etc. Haus allows you to design and launch experiments in minutes and get results in as little as 2 weeks. So we are all actual customers of Haus. We all use it. I actually got both Connors onto it. I was just such a big fan, and I just couldn't help but share some of the tests that we were running. And I thought it was super cool. And I knew we had a group chat going, and I knew that both of these guys were spending on a lot of different, channels and platforms. And we were all looking at things similarly, but really looking to kind of take a step up. So yeah, if it's good enough for me to sell these guys on it, I think it's good enough for you guys to try out.
As you can tell, we could do a whole episode about Haus, and we probably will at some point, but this is just the ad read. So if you want to add marketing rigor to your organization and make the most impact with your spend, go to haus.io/operators. That's HAUS.io/operators to learn more.
Now, I'm curious, like how you guys level things. I'm curious a little bit more, just like specifics of your guys' orgs, if that's
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, I wanted to get super granular, and I don't think we need to like spend a ton of time here on like what every single person does, but yeah, I'm happy to kick it off. We level things. I got my little document in front of me because we brought in a VP of HR that's done an incredible job of like really like building this out for us. But our levels are CEO, president, chief, VP, head / GM, director, manager, specialist, coordinator, support. We don't really have any support or specialists right now, but the way that we've structured our org, Cody, is what it seems like you're working towards, where we've basically we have a director for every, call it vertical within growth. So we have a director of paid media. Well, now that person's head of advertising, but he was our director of paid media. We have a director of paid media creative, director of retention, director of affiliate, SEO, director of influencer. So that the buck stops with them, right? Like in terms of collaboration, I am collaborating with them on what the strategy should be and how we're gonna like tactically achieve those strategies. But it's up to them to go in and execute it. And I obviously will jump in and execute and get in the weeds here and there or where needed and help them troubleshoot. But they own the channel and the things that we're doing in that channel. More recently now, we're starting to build out under them. So now we have a retention manager, we have a designer full-time, we have a full-time copywriter. So we've started to bring our US retention is fully in-house now. We have an e-commerce manager who oversees all things e-com operations from paid media, creative to, landing pages, all of it. We have a retention manager who handles all relationships and task management influencer manager, within influencer. We have an affiliate manager who helps, like send product out to all these affiliates and whatnot. I think that's the core growth team right now. We're hiring for a ton of roles. So that'll be getting added to soon, but yeah, we're slowly but surely building out that manager level now under the directors. And I'm also kind of grouping in like copywriters and designers within that.
So you have had people that are directors without reports, right? Or even manager level without reports, and you're kind of trying to build underneath them. Is that right?
What do you mean without reports?
Like without direct reports underneath them. So without people reporting to them. So like, does every director that you have a team underneath them, or some are more of a IC, like individual contributor role?
Most do, or we're actively hiring. So every director has a team under them. And now we're starting to build that out under the managers too. But for the most part, the managers right now are more so either A, direct contributors, or B, they're very involved in managing an agency and the deliverables of those agencies. But that's going to change as we build out, our creative teams internally more, and our kind of like coordinator level folks more, who are like setting up the campaigns and project managing everything and all that jazz. But yeah, it's mainly director manager level right now.
Do you have any directors who don't have reports? Because that's a way that I'm thinking about it. And I'm curious, how you guys think about it, but like hiring just very strong individual contributors, senior individual contributors, and hiring less total people, but just stronger overall people.
Yeah.
And they might not need, reports underneath them.
Our former director of paid media, now head of advertising, right now doesn't have any folks that report to him, but that's going to change drastically in the next 3 months. Like he's probably going to have 2 or 3 people reporting to him, because right now he's overseeing, and he's heavily involved in managing agency partners and outsourced media buyers. So he is managing folks in that sense. But yeah, we're probably gonna have 2 or 3 people that he manages directly in the next handful of months here. So that'll change soon. But everyone else, has people reporting directly to them.
I think it really depends on the channel. We mostly have directors with direct reports, but there's a handful of people who are directors just from like a seniority standpoint that don't have people reporting into them, and might not, like over the longer term, like they could just be highly productive as individual contributors, or their job is largely managing external partners, which could totally be done by a director. So yeah, I could see it getting cut a bunch of different ways. I have a question for Connor quickly though on this. Like, how are you establishing what team deserves a director. Like you mentioned, having an affiliate manager. Will they pace towards being a director of affiliate, or will affiliate managers report into a director of growth or head of advertising?
Yeah, it's really based on bandwidth. Like it was kind of it's to use the head of advertising example here, like that guy was managing literally every single channel that we put paid media into, and it quickly became clear that we did not have enough heads to give the level of attention that we needed to give to all these channels. So we put a lot of focus in our core channels being Facebook, search, TV, but and we've rolled out other channels like Twitter, Snapchat, direct mail, podcast, but like we want to keep scaling those channels, but we could never keep scaling that. We could never scale those channels if we don't have a person who's solely focused on like non-digital ad channels and out of home. We need someone to focus only on direct mail, podcast, Snapchat, Twitter, and so on. So our director of paid media, head of advertising, can really go spend most of his time on Facebook, Instagram, search, TV, YouTube, and then he can have someone that reports to him that he is guiding strategically, but that person's responsible for like executing all of the things to be executed in those channels. So that's how we've approached it. It's really a bandwidth thing. I mean, that's how we decided to hire a retention manager. Our director of retention was doing great work, but we both agreed that there were more projects that we wanted to be moving forward that we just simply couldn't because we didn't have enough bandwidth. Okay, let's go hire a retention manager and we can start delegating execution of these projects to him. So I like that approach. I think it ensures you don't become bloated. You got to find that balance though. Like you don't want to get to a point where your team's completely burnt out and now you're like hiring as a last means necessary. You got to like have a feel for when the right time is to do that. But that's been our approach towards hiring it. And so far it's worked out. I think it's really forced us to only hire who's necessary and not hire, willy-nilly whenever, one thing comes up one time that you don't have someone for, which can be just as detrimental as having too lean of a team, I think. What about you guys? I would love to hear the breakdown of some of your teams. So like, CMO, growth reports into CMO, then what does that growth team look like? And then like one level below that, like what does that look like? I'm curious to hear how y'all structured it. Connor, you wanna kick it off?
Sure, I'll kick it off. Yeah, so I mean, I'll also keep it relatively high level here, but we've got a director of paid social who oversees the media buying team as well as performance creative. So that's probably one of the stronger examples of really categorically different teams reporting into a single director. But I think there's so many synergies and those teams need to work so closely together that we've found success there. We've got
you're saying that's categorically different, like performance creative and paid social?
And paid media. Yeah.
Paid media. I don't think they are. I think they're one of on the same team, just small departments within the same team.
Well, I guess that's what I mean. Yeah, totally. I don't think it's anything like particularly odd, but like we have video editors on one team and, media buyers on the other. They are different skill sets that are rolling up into one collective function of the organization. Yeah, but I'll give you an example of like our director of partnerships oversees all influencer buying. And what is also under that is like native email newsletter buying, which we'll spend like a couple $100,000 a year on that. There are more similarities between those two. You're like reaching out to partners, you're negotiating rates, you're analyzing performance. Those are rolling up into the same team. That the person doing email newsletter buys is also doing affiliate. We're getting further and further away from like commonalities, but those are also all non-programmatic channels. So anything that's like programmatic for the most part is rolling up into that director of paid social. We've got a couple others. Retention oversees email and SMS. There's one manager underneath her, as well as a couple overseas staff that just help the operations of all of that. And then we've got an interesting thing right now. We had a rollout earlier this year that we didn't end up hiring for an e-com product manager, but trying to better officiate the connection of like e-com ops to tech to like overall website experience and product strategy is another place where I'd like to see multiple teams come together more collectively. And I could see a director level person sitting over those teams.
Yeah. So can I ask you, Connor, more granularly about one like growth vertical you just mentioned? So director of paid social, that person reports in direct to you, right? Okay, and then media buying teams and performance creative teams report directly into the director of paid media or paid social. So what does that team look like under him? Like, how many media buyers? What's the creative stack look like? How many folks is that person managing?
Yeah, so there's 2 media buyers, there's 3 creative strategists, and that's actually a manager and 2 associates. So you can see like the full hierarchy coming together here.
And by the way, is that your leveling? Do you go director, manager, associate?
We are in the process of like auditing how we're doing levels. We're going to go to associate, manager, senior manager, director, senior director, VP, senior VP. This is like the goal, very roughly. But yeah, right now it's associate manager to director. So we've got the creative strategists there. They're overseeing the team of editors that I mentioned on a previous pod, oversees editors and designers there. And then the paid media, 2 paid media buyers, and they have 1 overseas staff that helps with some of the operations there. So in total, that's like, I mean, let's call it 6 people or so.
And then how do you organize? How do you think about? So I assume, all right, let's start. I have 2 questions. One about the media buyers and how you organize those folks, and then how you think about the CS people. So your media buyers, how are you thinking about their responsibilities? Is that grouped like paid social and search? Is that like all digital paid media and like non-digital paid media? Or how are those 2 paid media buyers organized in terms of roles and responsibilities?
So it's all paid social. That's an important piece. Paid search would fit onto that team. We currently have a director of paid search who's been here quite a while. So that's technically a separate team. The 2 media buyers I mentioned are overseeing all of paid social. And that's like, yeah, currently that's all paid social, but linear TV will roll up into this team. Paid social is like a little too narrow of a term, I think. It'll quickly expand to just like paid media generally. So how that's structured, the media buyers are some mix of channel and geo, basically. So we're on like YouTube Shorts, YouTube in-stream, we break out. Those are like separate media buying strategies: TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook. And then a couple of those we also do internationally. So we'll have someone like the media buyer own YouTube in-stream, for instance, and they'll own that across categories. So they'll say, I'm owning the media buying for YouTube in-stream for EDC and travel and rings. And then what sometimes happens on the creative side is it is actually category specific. So we have a woman owning all of EDC content right now, and she could be producing, depending on our goals or our channel strategies at any given point in time, she's overseeing the development of vertical video or longer form horizontal video or something like that. So that's the big difference, is how are we orienting those teams? Creative strategists by product category, media buyers by channel, and then that also dictates the meeting structure for them as well. Where it's like, if we're discussing travel, you're getting a certain like a segment of the team. If we're discussing media buying generally, I'll talk to that whole group together. We'll tie in the paid search team. And they are really owning not just the media buying piece, but identifying where are our areas of opportunity. So for instance, they're like, we need stronger creative here, or we think there's room to improve conversion rate across this channel, or there's an allocation decision that we want to make. They're owning a lot of decisions that are outside of any particular ad account.
That's really interesting to hear. And Connor, you've been at Rich for how long? 7 years?
Yeah, like 7.5.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. Like, you have spent 7 years building out a super well-oiled team that has very specific focus, and that takes time and like a lot of thoughtfulness. So kudos to you, because that's pretty cool to hear how you have that organized. I imagine then like tons of collaboration happening between like the media buyer. Did you say media buyer focused on not just channel, but also product category too, as well as the creative strategists?
Well, they'll ultimately own like, yeah, they're owning all of YouTube, for instance. And then depending on what we're talking about, they'll own that by category, right? So if I'm owning YouTube, I own that for EDC and travel. I might be talking to different creative strategists between those two categories.
Got it.
So do you have somebody, like YouTube is just doing YouTube, your Meta person, are they just buying Meta? Do you have somebody who's like TikTok and Snap together? Like, I'm curious what the splits are a little bit more.
Yeah, so the way it's actually broken out, we can go through it. Like one guy owns international EDC. So that's a little bit different. That's where like it is geo-specific. The other media buyer owns EDC in the US on Meta. And the international Meta buyer also owns the tertiary channels. So TikTok, Snap, Twitter. Doesn't own YouTube, does own Facebook for travel. So yeah, I guess there's a couple of ways. We have it laid out in a spreadsheet. And
how do you coordinate budgets like with so many, hands in there who are playing a role in spend? How do you ensure that your MER, your blended, is aligning with so many people that have input on spend? Curious that process.
Yeah, so like all of our projections are broken out by category. So like in the US, we have expectations for both revenue and spend for EDC, for rings, for travel. So then that kind of naturally becomes, and then we're also measuring every day, like how are we pacing towards those projections? So that's how we'll get to category level budgets or something like that. And that solves a lot of it. And then the second thing that I'll say is all these campaigns across all these channels are tagged so that when I'm looking at it every day in Northbeam, I know exactly what we spent across what category and across what channel. And we could break it down further where we're looking at like colorways within a category or something like that. So it really just comes down to measurement at that point. And if we have clear like top line goals, it becomes easier for us to make sure that from a bottoms up perspective, we are like marching in the same direction.
Connor, what was that line you said about naming conventions and what they are to a business?
The heart and soul of every brand.
Soul of every brand. Great line. Great line.
Do you have other like sayings like that? Because I've been thinking about that one, and I think it's like probably way funnier than that is, because it's just so ridiculous and out there. Like, do you have other ridiculous sayings like that?
No, dude. I'll try to. I'm sure I've said some of them in the past. I wish I had more off the top of my head here. That is one of my favorites, so I'm glad that resonated with you. I've been sitting on it. That's been sitting in my Twitter drafts for a really long time. I just happened to work at the
Maybe
last
that's
episode.
it. Just unload the drafts. Just tell us what you got.
Yeah.
We're super excited to talk today about one of our sponsors, Aftersell. All three of us, Jones Road Beauty, Hexclad, and Ridge Wallet, are customers of Aftersell. If you're selling on Shopify, you need to find ways to boost your average order value. One of the best ways to do this is cross-selling and upselling, and there are a lot of different ways and places you can do this. One of the best places to do it is right when that conversion is happening, and that is exactly what Aftersell facilitates for you. So what actually is Aftersell? Aftersell is a widget that you install on your website, and on the post-purchase page, right after someone's completed their conversion, they're basically getting this upsell and or cross-sell. It's super seamless. It's one click, and it adds it to the order. They do not have to go through checkout again. It's really just free, not free, but it's incremental revenue that you're getting from someone that's already bought from you. One thing I love about Aftersell is you can decide to optimize it a ton or not at all. Either way, it's going to drive you a ton of incremental revenue. And if you have the team and the bandwidth and you want to optimize it, you can do all sorts of analysis on which products are most likely to be bought with other products, doing those sequential order and market basket analyses. And you can literally build out different funnels, as many as you'd want for different products, depending on what that first ordered product was, and then upsell them super intentionally based on that first order product. So love Aftersell. It's driven 6 figures of incremental revenue for us in a very short period of time. And I highly recommend it. If you want to check them out, head over to aftersell.com. Cody, I want to switch to you. Before I do that, Connor, what about your retention team? I imagine that's a little less complicated, or just because you have this interesting hodgepodge of CS and media buyer that's cut by channel or even intra-channel and product type, which creates a bunch of really interesting combinations. But what about retention? Is that a little more to the point where it's just director of retention, designer, copywriter, implementer, or is it a bit more than that?
Oh yeah. Well, one, paid social team's definitely I would call it overbuilt to some degree. We have really high expectations for rings, travel, and EDC on a short and long-term time frame. So we're over investing there to make sure we're developing the skills and knowledge and operations to support a much larger business. All the other teams are much flatter. To your point, we have a director of retention. She has a retention manager underneath her. They have a couple VAs help with the operations. As I mentioned, from a design perspective, there is a designer that reports into the art department. So it's like a brand resource that would be a dotted line over to the creative team. So that's like a super tight team. They're meeting multiple times a week and like working towards the same goal of executing on an email and SMS content calendar. But technically, like the graphic designer doesn't report into the director of retention.
Okay, so you have an art department that reports into, I presume, like you said, you have a VP of brand or director of brand. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's like a director of the art department, and then there's 2 designers underneath him, and then they will like be resources for other parts of the organization. So we have a similar thing for like our ecom creative workflow. Is our ecom ops manager is working with a designer from the art department in order to execute on that vision. And at least the way it's kind of shaken out for us over the last couple years is those cross-team workflows and functions are what end up being super key. So yeah, email design is one, ecom creative is one, wholesale creative is another one. These are just like workflows that require members from different teams to work together on a very consistent basis.
Wow, that's very thoughtful, very built out. What did getting to that point look like? Because in my experience, and I've only been building the team at Hexclad for almost a year and a half now, and we've made a lot of progress. But for as many like awesome things we've done, we've made as many mistakes that we've had to be like, oh, that actually doesn't work, and we need to do it this way because it didn't work, and here's why we don't think it worked. It worked. I just think it's interesting for people to hear. Would you say was there a lot of struggle involved in figuring out the correct team stack and how to organize everything efficiently and in a way that produces the best results, or not really? Did it kind of fall into place fairly seamlessly?
No, totally. There's been a ton. I mean, I'd even say from Ridge's perspective, we took too long to hire. So like, I don't feel like I've been building a team for all that long. Like maybe the last 3 years is when it's really become a focus of like, oh, all of a sudden I'm managing people and processes now. So I'll just say that generally is like, we definitely by no means have it figured out. But in terms of the dotted line that I just described between the art department on the brand team and the retention team underneath marketing is a relatively new thing. That actually was officiated like a year ago, right around this time. And the idea there was it has to be a dotted line one way or another. You want your graphic designers and like the people who are establishing the aesthetic of the brand, like clustering in some regard. So you either have dotted lines from an e-com designer and an email designer and a wholesale designer, or you group all the designers together and you get dotted lines back to each like key workflow or team within the business. And I personally like the way it's structured now. It's definitely been the best way we've done it so far, but I could see the needs of an e-com business being supported in other ways as well.
Cody, what about you? How are you guys doing things at Jones Road?
I would say definitely similarities there, definitely differences. Ridge is larger than us and more established. So I think, it'll be interesting to see if we go that direction or not. We're definitely very, very lean, and I think we're looking to, really start building our team. So, like I said, we don't currently have director of growth, but hopefully we will soon. And that person will be primarily, responsible for overseeing acquisition. So we currently have a manager and an associate manager. Those are our 2 buyers, and then a creative strategist. Under the creative strategist, we've got 2 freelance, but they're pretty much full-time, video editors. One of them is, local. One of them is overseas. Looking to hire like a designer as well right now. We're having all of our, design stuff, so all of our static stuff done on the creative team. But I think there'd be some advantages to having that be done, on the growth team, just for a little bit more collaboration and just a little different culture. We have a retention manager looking to hire a retention director, and then looking to build data and eventually, e-com teams. But haven't had anybody in either of those roles. We're just, super lean. I think there are probably a lot of ways to do it. I like to have people because our team is smaller, we don't have as many people. So we have people focusing on multiple channels. So the way that we do it is our associate manager uploads all of our stuff to Meta. So he does that. And then our manager manages the channel, kind of buys on that channel. And then the associate manager takes kind of like some of our smaller channels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, kind of buys on those. We have an agency that does Google currently, that does search. So our manager manages them as well. So I currently don't, and I don't think there's any right or wrong. It's probably wrong, but not right. Like clearly what Rich is doing, it works, and we'll probably get to something like that. But for us, I like to have people across multiple channels. Like I almost don't even like the distinction of paid social, or even like, I guess paid social. Like to me, it's just like all acquisition. And because I don't want to get into this game where it's like, hey, here's my budget on this channel. Well, no, my channel is doing so well. No, my channel is doing well. Like I want us just all to be on the same team. And I'm just so aware of like the incentives, changing people's behavior. Whether, even like you take the best, most well-meaning people on earth, but you give them different incentives, and it changes their viewpoint and how they look at things. But I know there are different skill sets, and as we grow and each channel becomes larger, like you can have one person buying multiple channels at a smaller brand, and then as you get larger and larger, you probably need a little bit more specialty. But for now, we haven't had to. So all of our paid social is done with essentially two people, with me overseeing it. We have an agency for search and an agency for TV. And then, direct mail, we haven't done a ton. So we do need to have a few more hires, but we're not going to hire specifically for that. We're going to hire the director of growth, and then they're going to, lead the charge and oversee that. So that's kind of how we currently do it and have it split. But yeah, so we've got, growth, we've got creative strategists. So to me, I agree with Connor, like that makes sense, even though growth is very different. Media buyer is very different than a creative strategist and an editor. Like they have the same goal, so they're on the same team. It's like a center and a point guard. Like yes, very different positions, but all playing the same game, going towards the same thing. But like our brand team interacts much closer with our our creative team. It's just a closer cultural fit. They kind of care about the same things. So like our organic social team, works very closely with our editor who's on our creative team. And so those things are slightly different. But yeah, so we've got directors of a bunch of the departments, but like I said, the ones where we don't have directors, we're looking to hire directors. We've got managers for a bunch, and then we've got some coordinators as well. Like our influencer team, we've got a director of influencer, reports to senior director of brand, and then we've got influencer coordinator as well. So yeah, that's kind of our current structure and where we have. But again, we're looking to kind of build it out and grow just so we can, try to do a little bit more and do new things. We're just being really thoughtful about it and trying to figure out like where do we want to invest to be able to do it, because we've been able to get by without director of e-com or something like that until now.
So you guys heard it. Jones Road Beauty's hiring. Cody at jonesroadbeauty.com. Spam him. Hit him up.
A lot of roles.
No, I was going to say one thing that Cody said that I really liked and has been a learning lesson for us. I think if we look back on the business 6 years ago, we built it in a really kind of flat way. Like we had like a lot of managers, we had a lot of directors, and like no kind of clear hierarchy. We've brought on a VP of brands, been on the team for like 18 months. We brought on a number of new people in the executive staff. And I do think it's way easier to, if you have the opportunity, hire the senior people first, allow them to build out and hire the people underneath them as they see fit. Because like impossible to get a director who like perfectly, or sorry, a VP or senior director, whatever you want to call it, to come into a business and it just work. Like there's always this like recalibration. So I think that's a really valuable insight that Cody highlighted.
And that's hiring in general, right? Like hiring is always work up front to produce more effectiveness and ultimately like offload work that person's going to take on. But like there's an on-ramp period, there's a training period. Like you got to put in the work up front and then reap the benefits, 2+ months down the line. So it's not like hiring someone's going to be an immediate day one fix to all your inefficiencies, right? That's just not how it works. You got to put in the effort to let that person do that, I think. Cody, one thing that I thought of when you were explaining your org structure, because you don't have a lot of directors, but you have a lot of doers, it sounds like. So I'm curious, like with your with your paid social ad buyer, the person who's pulling the levers in Facebook, like what is the like I meet with my directors weekly and we're talking about, I mean, not strategies as much weekly because, you know, we've aligned on those at the beginning of the year and the beginning of the month. That it's more so just like prioritizing as the year goes on. But we're basically doing like status updates, collaborate. It's basically like the way I look at the one-on-ones, like status updates. We're collaborating, and we're troubleshooting together. And then like based on those conversations, they can go and get back into the weeds and like, you know, push the buttons, pull the levers. What does it look like for you working with the person, let's just as an example, say pulling the levers in Facebook? Like what's that cadence look like that you're meeting with them? What's their involvement in the strategy versus just doing? What does that shake out to be like?
Yeah, good question. So I like async as much as possible because I have, you know, all of these different parts of the org that I'm responsible for. But I also, you know, we are mostly in office. We're 2 to 3 days a week in office. So I prefer less meetings, but I like just being able to just, you know, have quick conversations. Let's do this. Boom, let's do this. So a lot of it is we have a VA who will pull pacing twice a day at 11 and 4 p.m. You know, the first thing we'll just check is our pacing, MER, AMER, contribution margin. We'll just touch base and be like, hey, we good? Like, and it's really either we've got to cut spend, things haven't been looking good the last few days. You know, we can scale, like we've got some room to scale, or let's leave it as is. And we try to get in a cadence where we're, you know, twice a week, hopefully making changes. If it's things look worse, we got to do it more often. But a lot of times those are just a quick conversation, either in Slack on a remote day, or if it's just, you know, their office is right, or their desk is right outside of my office. So it might just be like, hey, did you see that? Like, do you have a second to come in here? And then just depending on, you know, what we think the changes are that we need to be making, we just kind of go back and forth. Well, let's pull from here. Hey, give me your recommendation. Especially if I'm busy and I'm in meetings all day, it's either, hey, go make these changes, do whatever you think to do to keep us pacing, or like, hey, give me your recommendations. Like, do you see any opportunities where you think we can allocate spend a little bit better, or how are we doing things? And so there's a lot of that, you know, is async. I do like everybody that reports to me, I do like a bi-weekly, you know, one-on-one, but that's more of like a personal thing. Hey, here's feedback. What feedback do you have for me? Like what's going well, what's not? But then also, you know, where it's necessary, try to do stand-ups. So that might be like a Monday morning, 30-minute meeting, you know, like how are we doing? How are we pacing? What are we going to do about it? Like I'll meet with retention manager currently. And it's just like, hey, how are we pacing? Oh, we're 4% below email and SMS pacing for the month. All right, cool. What are you going to do about it? Like what are you know? Give me your recommendations. How do you think we make that gap? So it's kind of just like a quick like performance management touch base to do it. So it's either a quick stand up, and then we've got like the larger things that's like creative sprints, or that's like a monthly performance review. But we like to do as much as possible. Like we'll finish our, you know, MMM call at the end of the month, and we'll just stay on, you know, for 15 minutes, just like our internal team, and be like, yeah, what do we like about it? What not? What's our budget for the next month? And how do we want to allocate it? So I guess it's a lot of just like quick little meetings. That's why I like the in-person stuff, or a lot of async. That's just how I like.
Do you have any tips or tricks for effective async? Because I think a lot of folks here think to themselves, oh man, I'm in too many meetings. Oh man, these are not always super productive. Any tips or tricks to have effective async communication?
Yeah, I mean, I got to a point like last year where I was in meetings all day, and I still feel like I am, where I'm just like, I just got to rip the Band-Aid off, like, and just like send out these rules in Slack where it's like, guys, like if it can be an email, make it an email. It can be a Slack, make it a Slack. You know, no meetings without agenda. If you schedule it for 30 minutes, try to schedule it for 15, you know, make them back to back. So I think there's just all these things that you can do to try to optimize and make it a little bit more effective. And so I'm down for that, but you also got to be careful of, hey, this was a 30-minute back and forth in Slack, and if you picked up the phone and called me, it could have been a 5-minute thing. Right? So I'll try to do that as well.
Sometimes the meeting is more effective.
Yeah. So you got to be cognizant and careful. Yep. Yeah, and it especially depends what it is. If it's something sensitive, like I think one of the things that I'm guilty of is like I'll just be super quickly between meetings, like boom, do that, and like it's sometimes hard to recognize tone. And so like versus if it was a meeting, you might be like, hey, that's a great idea, but and like it just tone is very hard to read. So I'm trying to do a little bit better job of that with quick Slacks. But yeah, those are kind of some of the things that have helped to limit some of our meetings.
I think status updates are best done async. Like I don't need to get on a call with you to tell me where we're progressing in our new apron statics we're pulling together. I think collaboration and like problem solving is best done on a call. Like I'd rather get on a call with a designer and just talk about feedback than send them a list and then they have questions. And now we end up in that situation you mentioned where we just did 20 minutes of back and forth where probably could have spent 3 minutes discussing it verbally. And I think there's a lot lost in async comms for stuff like that. I like that you have rules. I think that's super critical. I started to implement that a little bit more with like agendas and stuff like that. What about you, Connor? Any?
Yeah, our TV, real quick on that, like our TV buyer, we're meeting with our agency and our TV buyer, and essentially just going down a doc, and I love them, they're great, but just going down a doc. Here's what we cleared, here's what we spent, here's our top performing channel. And I was like I get what I need reading it beforehand. You know what I mean? Like I don't necessarily need the meeting to just go through that. So I think you just got to decide what's the point of the meeting. And is it just to update on things, to communicate? That can be done async. Like I even realized that lately because I am trying to do a better job of communicating and updating everybody, or at least like the directors in our org on things. So I was thinking about it. I was like, I write a weekly newsletter to a lot of people, and like it has given me influence and has made me, more effective in communicating ideas and things like that, and built an audience. And I'm like, why don't I just do that internally? Like writing is something I'm actually decent at and I'm good at. I'm like, why don't I just do that? Like, I don't like meetings. I don't like getting in front of everybody as much. So I started doing that monthly, and that's been really effective. And so that's something I would recommend. It's kind of like, it's essentially like a newsletter, a memo that I just put in a Slack channel with all of our directors. But then I met with our demand planner right after we had like our touch base, and like, she was like, hey, you said these things, like, here's some follow-up questions on these, or here's some feedback. And so that's been something that I've also gotten a lot of value of, is if you don't love meetings, just be more proactive about written communication, not to one person, but to many people as a leader. Like you said earlier, it's about like, writing is thinking. And so that's another thing I'm really trying
Memos, to do. Those that's becoming a theme for different use cases here. That's super cool. Sweet. All right, cool. I guess we'll wrap it there. All right, that's a wrap on episode 5. We hope that you have a better sense of how, we organize our teams, and maybe some insights and next steps into how you can go about organizing yours efficiently. Thank you once again to our sponsors, Motion, Richpanel, Haus, and Aftersell. If you like the episode, please subscribe. Check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and let us know if you have any questions. Please leave some comments, tweet at us, let us know what you'd like us to go over. We really want to take suggestions from the audience and address those in the show. Thank you so much.